the Kenya-Somali boundary dispute. Over the weekend, the Star carried a story talking about is President Uhuru Kenyatta preparing to sack the foreign CS Juma. But what I want to look at is how we've handled it, the dispute. So I'm just going to read an excerpt from that article, and it's a quote. They say, apart from the legal team, our behind-the-scenes diplomacy has not worked. The team that has been handling the issue has been underrating Somalia. As a result, even our traditional friends have not been lobbied properly, and others have no idea of what support we would like. Kenya has sought, or did seek successfully, a postponement of the the hearing of the dispute at the International Court of Justice. Okay, you're pointing at the professor, so I'll start there. Ahmed is pointing at you.
And I was going to point.
I can start.
Okay.
We want to go down the line.
All right. Professor, I'll start with you. Have we bungled it? Have we?
Everybody gets a chance.
Our handling of it.
Only we have not we have not bungled it. Okay, I think the most important thing that Kenya need to have is to be very clear and consistent about what do we want out of this. Making sure that we understand the bigger picture is to have an effective relationship with Somalia. That any step toward confrontation will set in the entire East Africa and affect our development and relationship with the rest of the world. There are a lot of interference in Somalia. There is always, whenever there's a weak vacuum, there are all kinds of characters there. There are people seeking economic gains, there's people seeking political gain, and they're very active. These folks are not interested in the well-being of the continent of Africa, on coexistence by countries. And so we have to be very careful on how we go about it, and we have to put forward the best minds that we have in the country. We have quite a number of trained people who understand the history of Somali Kenya, the history of Somalia. And what we need to be also clear about is having a very clear demarcation. What is the bottom line for Kenya? You know, what do we want out of this? There are Kenyans who have died recently in Somalia for the purpose of making Somalia better, so that we can have a very good coexistence. The Somalia people benefit out of the relationship we have, obviously. But this dispute about this boundary, about this water, when you open it up, then you open a can of worms throughout Africa. And that should not happen at all. And so President Kenyatta has been very good lately with personal diplomacy. You know, if it is necessary, go and have a meeting in Somalia if it's necessary, and continue toward that so that we can have eliminate all this foreign interference and be talking to each other.
Okay, the African Union is actually pushing for this to be resolved out of court.
Of course.
Ahmed, should we leave it to the International Court of Justice?
No, we should not.
No.
All of us agreed that the most important thing is to get an auspices under the good offices of the African Union to sit with Kenya and Somalia and, you know, really find a just solution to this problem and to trace back where the problem came from and how we can solve it. That's one. But on the fundamental policy issue of Somalia, I've always said on this show, are we there because we're peacekeeping? Are we trying to maintain peace? Are we doing peacekeeping? Are we state making? What is the policy there? Because, you know, there's a danger of mission creep. Mission creep is when in the middle of the muddled waters of Somalia, the principles of the policy change. So the first law that we should have as a foreign policy, and I don't think that these newspapers that talk about differences that Juma is not doing her job or is not doing this, I think that's just politics, right? And you know, we've had two women in the Foreign Office. We've had the brilliant Amina
Yes.
Mohammed, who was there, who did a tremendous job there, and the Monica Juma, who's just gotten in. So I think that we ought to respect that, you know, when we get women in positions of power, that we ought to give them a chance and not to be too overtly opposed to them. But also, we have the state interest. And the state interest was that we had a policy before in Somalia that was working. Right now, something is not working. And what's not working is we are not together with the Ethiopians. The Kenyans and the Ethiopians are not together on the issue of Somalia. And the national security interest of Ethiopia and Somalia, and I challenge anybody else to come and debate this with me, is to have a strong state that takes care of its security in Somalia, so that we don't take that responsibility. And then the next thing we need to do is to trade and do business with Somalia and Ethiopia and Kenya, and they grow, and the national, the regional domestic product will grow by hundreds of %. That is in our national security interest. Nothing else is. Balkanizing Somalia is not in our national interest. It will mean that we don't have good intentions there, and the neighbor in Somalia is going to continue having terrorism and all these other issues. Last thing, from a multilateral point of view, I believe that it is very important that the office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kenya, the office, and the person in it is very close to the president. And that's the person who makes the foreign policy, implements the foreign policy. But the foreign policy of Kenya is President Kenyatta's foreign policy. It's not Monica's Juma foreign policy. She helps in, you know, analyzing it and implementing it, but it's President Kenyatta who wants to implement a certain foreign policy. So President Kenyatta must reach out to the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, and they need to probably have a new summit and to sit down and say, what is it that we're not doing correctly in Somalia? And how do we get over this hump?
Yes.
And you know that in Ethiopia that we have a new system. Before we had the TPLF and a very authoritarian, strict government. We now have probably the best leader we have today in Africa, in Ahmed Abiy. And we ought to engage Ethiopia in that, and we ought to engage the Somalis themselves. The reason why these things are going to court is because the engagement between Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya is not working. And we ought to really do that, and we ought to really bring a summit together. We really need to look at that policy and say, what is it that's not working, so that we can try and fix what's going on in Somalia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Nzau, he's raised an interesting point. There seems to be, I don't know, some disconnect of late.
Yes. You see, it is not good to say that, you know, maybe Kenya has failed or Ethiopia and Kenya not agreeing and so on. These are all states. They are independent entities. They are all looking for, you know, to meet their national interests. And it's the international system out there is like a playing field. Everyone is trying to get their interests at place. There are so many countries that have interests in other places. Now, one thing we have to be careful is that this context or this theater where we have a disagreement with Somalia over the boundary is not benign. There are so many other over 500 in the world that are unresolved. Now, when Hugo Grotius was writing in the 16th and 17th century about amity and international law from the seas and the high seas, and you know how do you manage the navigation of this common resource, this global common, and the idea here is I would agree with everyone else that the best is to negotiate. And you cannot wish away your neighbors and so on. Now, then you cannot tell another country to its face that what it's doing is not right and so on. Somalia belongs to the people of Somalia, the Somali themselves. They have a federal system. And a federal system in its strict sense is that you have a sort of almost autonomous entities that run their affairs. And it's because of their own cultural, historical, territorial, political issues. And therefore, that we have to respect. Now, when you say Kenya and Ethiopia are not agreeing, no, Kenya and Ethiopia are part of AMISOM. They are part of the entire program to help Somalia to get on its feet. They may disagree, countries may disagree about how to get there, but I think it is in everyone's interest to support the system to work. Nobody said that we should balkanize Somalia, but it's up to the Somali people to decide, to agree, and all that. So we cannot come here and say that countries are deciding about other countries. Let's let the people of Somalia to do that. The United Nations Security Council has continued to extend AMISOM's mandate. AMISOM has a program for Somalia. The African Union has that program. All the countries have to support that. That's the ideal. But I wouldn't like the political undertones and push and pull between countries to be seen to be the norm.
Okay.
And so on.
All right. Dr.
Yes.
There are many on the panel. So. Dr. Kanenje, is the media playing up this dispute? You know, when we talk about that, or, you know, government representatives from Somalia were not allowed entry into Kenya, when we say their plane was forced to first land in the north before it came to Nairobi. Is the media playing up the dispute?
I would say yes and no. But you know what is sensational is what is media worthy. What is newsworthy is what is sensational. So I'm not surprised that, you know, the media would look for, you know, those juicy parts of the whole story. Now, the truth is we're in interesting times in the region, and we're not having perfect relationships with some of our neighbors, and that is true. And a lot of it has also to do with what foreign interests are actually playing into this. The dispute itself that we have with Somalia, we don't really have any beef. It's in our national interest not to balkanize Somalia, but to have a united Somalia. It is our national interest to assist Somalia to the extent that they can be able to help themselves. You know, I'm looking to a day when the Republic of Somalia is going to be part of the East African community. They also use the shilling, by the way. It's just a little bit inflated. So, you know, so we should not look at it as if, you know, it is something that's just a media thing. Now, going back to, because you started by saying whether the Foreign Affairs Ministry or CS is not doing a good job. Now, you can have lots of disagreements with Dr. Monica Juma, but one thing you can never accuse her is actually that she's lazy. She's not. She's a workhorse. And she's been a tough lady, you know, in trying to advance Kenya's diplomacy. Now, perhaps some people may not agree with her in what they perceive its style, but to be honest, lots of pundits don't really know what goes on in the inside, you know, a lot of times. And so people are going to have all types of opinion. But personally, I would not be the first one to campaign that she's replaced or anything like that. Just the other day, we got an endorsement by the AU for the non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. You know, can you just think it just happened on its own? This was actually a lot of hard work, and you have to give it to her. This is something that many countries would not have been able to do, given where we were, especially in relation to our main competitor, which was Djibouti, you know, at the time. Now, it is true that some of our partners in Somalia are actually working at cross purposes, and a lot of them are also being influenced, you know, by the outside. They have their own national interests, and sometimes the national interest goes counter to our national interests. We know that certain parties, both from Europe and the Middle East, they're supporting different camps and competing, you know, camps in Somalia. That actually goes against our own national interest to stabilize Somalia, because then you cannot be able to have a united front. Now, we are in Somalia, not exactly just in peacemaking, we're under AMISOM. We're not, it's not Kenya Defense Forces, and that's something that needs to be understood. Okay, and so the Kenyan contingent of the AMISOM cannot just unilaterally, for instance, withdraw. You know, it has to be an AMISOM mandate. So I think the media should start phrasing this as AMISOM, not just as Kenya, you know, because I think there's sometimes confusion to that. However, the media should also be careful sometimes when it comes to some of this, you know, sensational or sensitive of matters. Now, with regard to the ICJ, just to conclude on that, it is not in the interest of either Kenya or Somalia or the Horn of Africa to pursue the ICJ way, because let's assume ICJ rules either on the side of Kenya or on the side of Somalia. If they rule against Kenya, Kenya's not going to accept it. If they rule against Somalia, Somalia's not going to accept it, you know, and that's only going to escalate the tension. So what is supposed to be done? And the AU has a forum to be able to do that. How about as Africans and the region, we actually just sit down and talk until the cows come home. That's what diplomacy is about. You know, the court has never been able to resolve a lot of similar cases, especially if one party, for instance, vehemently or disagrees with it. And so we have to go back to the negotiating table. I think that is the only practical and best and peaceful alternative that exists between us and Somalia.
Okay. Now, a lot of, I'm getting to you, Ambassador, I just want to put the conversation in context. I'm looking at several headlines from May with regard to this perceived spat between Kenya and Somalia. And on May the 11th, I see a headline on the East African. It says, Somalia concerned by Kenya's decision to divert Mogadishu flights. Can we put that on the screen? Oh, there it is.
Newspapers get
My
it
director,
wrong.
please put that on the screen. The headline, the East African.
Okay.
Okay. Somalia concerned by Kenya's decision to divert Mogadishu flights. All right. So part of that is cut off. Okay. Defiant Somalia puts contested oil block territory up for auction. That was June the 9th. The Standard, 3 Somali officials denied entry into Kenya at JKIA, and tit for tat as Somalia bans Nairobi meetings. Is there, I mean, what do you think there's some
Tough question.
do you think there's are we, is the media reading too much into these things,
Yes.
Ambassador, or is it a sign of things not okay in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Because they allege in that particular article that the PS and the CS are working at cross purposes.
Thank you, Olive. My colleagues are sighing because they say it's a tough question, but I think let's talk, because if we talk, then
Find solution, yes.
we don't find solutions. Let me take 1 or 2 minutes just to give you the background that the border issue in Africa is not unique like this case we are listening to. In fact, there is a very nice article written in this book here. I mean, this pamphlet.
Yes.
He's the author, by the way, and
Oh.
others. And, you know, they even organized a meeting on maritime crisis in Africa. I was privileged to be part of that. And it's very authoritative. You notice in this that it tells you, as if he knew we were going to talk about it this morning, that there are no less than 20 border disputes in Africa. And these border disputes all relate to, majority of them are quite a bit of them on land, also on land, but there is also maritime. Maritime is gaining ground because of the fact that now the blue economy is also ascending very high. Now, I am giving you that background to say that AU in 1963, actually there is a decision that was taken in 1964 in Cairo, which urged member states that we must continue to use the boundaries we inherited from the Berlin Conference, and that would also safeguard our... And so where most disputes have arisen, even when you went to court, unless it was a new state like Eritrea, it was easy for the case to be determined because it's a question of where are the beacons. Unfortunately, for the case of like what we are looking at, it's not easy to find the beacons. And so it is a gray area. But even if it is, I would have wanted to deal it within the AU remits and handle it. But then we made a mistake. When Somalia went to ICJ, we appeared before the court and started to defend the case. It's only when we realized that this defense mechanism we have analyzed, then we started to fall back and start condemning the court, saying the court has. But that is not even a good thing for Kenya to have done.
Yes.
Because your constitution here, chapter 1, says that the international laws that have been, you know, endorsed by the country are a part and parcel of the law. So you cannot say you are going to disobey your own law because it becomes part of our law. And then instead of then having that diplomatic approach initially, we took a tough stance. I'm sorry to disagree with you that we shouldn't talk.
It's good.
Because it's so good, always good to say the things as they are, and then we can correct. But I think Monica has now realized, and many others, they are doing the right thing at the moment. But we made a mistake by starting to close the border, cancelling flights, refusing, and in fact, the meeting is also moving out to Nairobi. That's a fact. Now, we have corrected that position. And as it has been said, President Uhuru has the capacity. You have seen how he's a charming person. He should be able to go on a diplomatic offensive
And talk to his
and
fellow leaders.
change this
Correct.
situation because it's not good.
Okay.
Correct.
And as we change it, we must learn lessons from
Yes.
it. There is no small nation,
Can
there is
I?
no big nation.
Yes.
We are all equal, and therefore we must handle each other carefully.
Okay, but what do you say to those people in closing, because my director wants to kick me out of studio.
Last comments,
Kick all of us out of studio. What do you say to those who say Kenya is too soft? You know, after all we've done for Somalia, did you see those sentiments on Twitter?
that's
and
what
you know,
I'm saying,
and they're saying,
that-
look at Migingo, look at, Kenya is too soft.
There is, under international law, we all stand equal. And I don't know what you call soft. Soft to who?
We have troops there. We can't be soft.
Okay.
Are these our last comments?
Okay, yes.
Diplomacy is supreme. And people understand the tough guy, you go there and get brute force and all that kind of thing. But the implication for a long time to come is very serious. We must maintain our right foot forward, which is diplomacy.
Okay. Ahmed?
I agree with the professor, Mr. Nyancha over there, and Hassan. I respectfully disagree with my really good friend, the doctor to the left of me. I'm not sure. I think that the president needs to and the foreign minister need to take the bull by the horn and make this issue go away. Because we're a very important player in the region, and we were missing in Sudan during the problems with the military dictatorship. Ethiopia was taking the lead. We have a super diplomatic relationship with Ethiopia, and we ought to maintain that. We got to make sure that our troops in Somalia don't shoot at each other. We've got to make sure that our policy there is the same, and it has to be positive in trying to create a proper country and a proper republic. My last comments, since we're on last comments, I would like to bring to the attention of this nation a simple policeman in northern Kenya, the boundary of Kenya and Ethiopia, Mr. Constable Jairus Mia, who traded his gun and for a chalk. And put down his guns and went to a class full of girls. You know how in northern Kenya girls don't have a lot of education because of a lot of culture and tradition. And I would like to tell the police commissioner that this is Mutiamana Sana. And he needs to make sure that this man is given a leadership position somewhere in the police force, because he has shown leadership by doing this. And this is the kind of police we want in this country. One who has something to do with the community, one who cares about the community and who's involved, and especially with the women. So that's my last 2 cents, Olive.
Right.
And I want to congratulate you for just a superb job you've done.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you.